Okay, let's start with the tree you saw in the road.
She said it was a place that was everywhere, but you couldn't find it if you tried.
I always thought the town was the worst part. And then I went through the tree.
See, you were lucky. The sun was still in the sky when you got here. People came to help. Not everybody gets that. Those things out there, they like to hunt. They like to play.
Everybody here just talks about how afraid they are of dying.
They're coming.
I don't think that's the worst thing that can happen to you here.
There's darkness in the forest. Nightmares you can't even begin to imagine.
It's all just a dream.
Things we were never meant to see. Things that...
Said this place couldn't break you. You don't fucking break me. That's what she said. Do you remember that?
We don't have time for it. You think those things that come out of the forest at night did this? They're just the tip of the spear.
You can't go to sleep. Do you understand what I'm saying? Are you listening to me? The talisman will not protect you. There is nowhere that you are safe. No. Tonight, tomorrow, every one of you is gonna
That was a hell of a song.
Knowledge comes with a cost.
Hello From fans, and today we're going to be explaining why Fromville is not the most trustworthy place, as well as get into why the town works the way it does and what exactly created Fromville in the first place. See, the thing about Fromville is anybody can be trapped there, from the kind and supportive to even the worst of the worst. And there's no type of person you want less around you in a situation like Fromville than a person like the character of Dale. Yes, while some folks say that Randall or even Acosta are the biggest problems for the people in Fromville, I personally believe Dale was the #1 least helpful resident in the entire town. Someone who is constantly belligerent and complaining, only ever helping people out reluctantly, and even stabbing Ellis while bickering. Of course, the actor does a great job and the character does get some well-deserved karma fitting of his character. But this just shows to go, yeah, that nobody's perfect and people are still people at the end of the day, good and bad. And while we have yet to get anyone as dangerous as a serial killer arriving into town, yet, I'm looking at you, new girl, we have had literal murderers enter the town like Father Kotri, someone who did in fact try to help the residents as much as he could, but was also responsible for killing a man literally a day before arriving into town. And honestly, until the reveal, you'd never expect him to even be a murderer with how supportive he was to the rest of Fromville's residents. This implying that any other characters we've seen could also be a murderer, especially Ethan. I know you killed the Chromonocle, I just can't prove it. But what about those folk who were completely normal when they arrived into town? Well, not only are they susceptible to fear taking over and acting irrationally, but also literal entities tapping into their minds and trying to manipulate them, genuinely transforming good, kind-hearted people like Sarah and Elgin into broken people who make very evil decisions. And for the people who don't fall for the entity's tricks and try to ignore them or even scoff at them when they try, well, they themselves are still risky to deal with, as they could potentially be the type to try to figure out how to leave, pushing for answers to the point that Fromville returns the favor and punishes them for their newly acquired knowledge. And for the people who don't try looking for answers, for those that simply try to make the best of the crappy situation they found themselves in and live peacefully, well, they could potentially have their bodies possessed or even tampered with to the point that they become violent and even killers. A sort of trauma that is completely out of their control. With all this being said, it proves that any resident within Fromville is genuinely a risk factor when it comes to your safety. However, I think everyone can agree that the residents of Fromville are far more manageable than the paranormal threats everybody has to deal with. But what happens when you blend these two things together? I think going into Season 4, we'll start to see exactly that. We see within some clips of Season 4 that a character named Jim is still alive, despite the fact that he got brutally bodied last season. This is very obviously thanks to the man in yellow who is likely to take his form. Speaking of which, do you guys notice how when the man in yellow morphs, he seems to have the same worms that Boyd had? Either way, the real question is, will Jim be the only form he takes? As if he can take Jim's form, there's a good reason to believe that he can take anyone's form. Meaning, any one of the characters we watch throughout Season 4 could potentially be the man in yellow in disguise. My theory is that he uses Jim's form for a little bit to basically traumatize the Matthews, and then leaves to hide and change into someone else. Meaning, you should definitely pay close attention to the characters within Fromville, and notice anyone establishing themselves as sort of a POV character, as opposed to someone who's sort of responding to all the other characters. For example, Christy, should she go into the season being more of a responsive and supportive character rather than a POV character? Is my number one pick for who the man in yellow will actually take over. But again, it really could be anyone. But this did leave me asking a question. Who is the man in yellow, and how much power does he truly have over this place? I personally believe he didn't necessarily create this place, but he did help create this place. See, when it comes to the question of what exactly is going on in Fromville, some people believe it's a time loop or a governmental experiment or maybe something utilizing Jade's tech research. But the only reason I disagree with those theories is the randomness of the paranormal entities. Sure, if it was just voices talking with residents inside their head, I could see the experimental value, but we have some strange things within this world that make no logical sense to implement from a psychological research standpoint. From giant spiderweb trees to killer puppets, there's so much in this world that just seems random. Especially considering any character can seemingly die and get taken out of this world at any point. See, when it comes to experiments or whatever have you, you have to ask who are they exactly targeting and why. But the residents of Fromville have shown to have more of a supernatural connection to ancestors and reincarnations of their past than any form of integral part to play inside of some grand experiment outside of maybe they're just experimenting on any humans they can find. Either way, you even have the environment itself that just seems too random. From its layout, hotel signs with no hotel, lighthouses in the middle of the woods. This is all just too much unpredictable chaos. And considering how long the timeline of events have been going on and people have been dying, I'm left to assume that what's going on here and how chaotic it is due to something supernatural that's out of control. For a few seasons, I figured maybe there was something in this place simply bringing people's nightmares to life, but that explanation feels too cheap to me, especially for a story that's promising to fix on the mistakes made in Lost. See, Lost ended up being a story where they kept adding new bigger mysteries because it drew audiences in, but they never actually anticipated how to bring closure to any of these mysteries. Versus From is a series meant to correct all these mistakes and be something thought of and planned out from the beginning. Still, with how much random things seem to be going on with no real narrative build-up, it's easy to assume that this could just be the result of someone's chaotic, nightmare-filled mind and having those nightmares come to life. But then how does that necessarily prove that the story's planned from the beginning? With a story of so much paranormal chaos, what little breadcrumbs can you leave to clue to the audiences that the narrative is planned out? Well, I think what the From writers did to solve this problem was include a story within their very own. That, of course, being the story of the Chromonacle. Yes, ever since season 1, every now and then we're getting references to this story that Ethan seems to be a fan of. This story also seeming to slightly allude to events within Fromville. And while this could just be some random characteristic of Ethan to show that he's a kid and is slowly growing up in a terrible place, I personally believe it's proof that Ethan is very vital to the From universe altogether. Think about it. What does Ethan like to do besides telling stories? That's draw. Sometimes drawing what is within these stories he likes. And what other key characters within the story like to draw? Well, that would be vital characters like Victor, whose drawings and his mother's drawings play a very key part in the existence of Fromville. So this is where my theory comes into play. See, while some believe Fromville exists because a group of people decided to do some sort of ritual with all their kids, resulting in Fromville's existence altogether, I think in actuality, Fromville existed before this ritual happened, and potentially the people used this ritual as a way to try to escape, instead resulting in them turning into the monsters we see. This could be solidified by the fact that we see people in 70s and 80s attire, Yet we also happen to catch glimpses of people from the Civil War era. But then that begs the question, what exactly is Fromville? Well, that is left to the creative liberty of the writers, who can change it at any point, but a theory I'd like to propose ties directly to not only the Man in Yellow, but the King in Yellow. Yes, the King in Yellow, a series of stories created by Robert W. Chambers. Stories that included things like plays that would drive the reader or viewer mad anytime they bear witness to it. Now what if, long ago, before the start of Fromville, there was a boy who liked to draw and liked to create stories. A boy who also happened to wear white. Now, what if this boy happened to come across some paranormal entity in that of the King in Yellow? The King in Yellow could have potentially offered a storybook for the boy to draw in, something that would allow the boy's drawings and imagination to come to life. This right here could have been the very origin point of From altogether, with the boy creating this sort of pocket dimension and world that people tend to get trapped in real life. But how would people get trapped in it necessarily? Well, potentially it could be anybody who has read, heard of, or even thought about the story of the Chromonocle. See, while we know the Matthews family are fully aware of the Chromonocle's existence, it's potentially possible that that's the one thing that tethers every other resident in Fromville together. Whether they hear it on the radio or hear some people talking about it, or potentially have family who are also a fan, all these people could have potential reasons to be connected and trapped within this storybook.
But how can the story be finished if all the players remain on stage? What if we, the people of this town, are living the book that has yet to be written? What if we were chosen?
And with the potential supernatural connections, this storybook could be handed to specific people that are needed within Fromville. People that could potentially be a reincarnation of previous Fromville residents, like Tabitha and Jade. It's also very possible that within this world, the boy's imaginations are bringing things to life, but either over time his own fears or potentially other people's fears also get brought to life. By that I mean, while the Man in Yellow could literally just be the King in Yellow, I also tend to believe that the Man in Yellow could also be a victim who's maybe more embraced the more malicious lifestyle of Fromville. By that I mean, over time Fromville could have needed another boy to take the Boy in White's role. Potentially this could have led to the Man in Yellow taking up that role, and maybe potentially being seduced by the dark side and the King in Yellow, who taps into his more malicious behavior. Potentially this could lead to the Man in Yellow worshipping this King in Yellow and his godlike powers he provides him, and resulting in the Man in Yellow also aiding in keeping the chaos going around the Fromville town. Whether that be providing his own nightmares from his own mind, or gaining nightmares from newer residents found every now and then. It's possible at some point Victor was meant to take this role, but Victor can't really make a decision on whether he's necessarily siding with the Boy in White or the Man in Yellow. Obviously he seems to be leaning more towards the Boy in White, but he doesn't really get many answers from him. However, he does draw quite a bit, and those same drawings Victor seems to fear sometimes, finding that it's better to keep the drawings buried away where people can't see them, as a message we keep seeing repeated is that knowledge comes at a cost. Potentially in Victor's broken mind, he's trying to save as many people as he can by keeping these pictures hidden and locked away. And it's very possible that Ethan is being built up as the next potential storyteller for this entire town. Then that leaves me with a couple of questions for you. Do you think Ethan would rather side with the Man in Yellow and gain whatever power he could from this place, given his trauma? Or would he side with the Boy in White in attempting to make the place a sort of heaven where everyone's best imaginations come true? Potentially going with a third option where he instead decides that no one should be trapped in a place like this or have the powers it provides, and instead rescues all the residents and allows them to be free. Maybe closing the chapter on this entire Fromville story altogether so no one else could get trapped inside. Is the Man in Yellow actually the King in Yellow? Or is he potentially just one of the King in Yellow's disciples, keeping things as chaotic and messed up while also being blessed with his power? A power that could have potentially been offered to the monsters we see walking around, but maybe didn't work out as well because they weren't as evil as the Man in Yellow could be. I just feel like if the Man in Yellow was the King in Yellow, he wouldn't come off as just an upgraded version of the monsters. Either way, if you enjoyed the video or the edit at the beginning, or are interested in seeing more videos like this when Season 4 finally comes around, it really helps out if you like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. Otherwise, while you're waiting for season 4, you can check out some of my other From videos, and I'll be seeing you guys there.